The underground parking garage smelled of oil, damp concrete, and something faintly metallic, like fear before it had a name. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, flickering just enough to make the shadows stretch and shrink along the pillars. Vivian Constance hated places like this. They felt uncontained, unpredictable, exactly the opposite of the world she had spent her life building. She pressed the lock button on her car keys, the sharp beep echoing through the level, while her phone rested between her shoulder and ear. Yes, move the compliance review to Thursday, she said crisply, already walking around in front of the car. No, I don't care that legal is pushing back. Tell them I want. A scream cut through the air. Matilda! Vivian spun just in time to see a man lunge out of the shadows and grab her daughter. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The stranger's arms wrapped around 6-year-old Matilda Constance, lifting her clean off the ground as he bolted away between rows of parked cars. Vivian's heart slammed so violently against her ribs she thought she might black out. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered uselessly onto the concrete. "Help!" she screamed, her voice tearing out of her chest. "Someone took my daughter." She ran, heels skidding, breath ragged. Every nightmare she'd ever buried roaring to life at once. The word kidnapper filled her mind so completely there was no room for anything else. And then a thunderous crash. Metal screamed against metal. Tires shrieked. The sound detonated through the garage like an explosion. Vivian froze. She turned slowly, dread crawling up her spine, and saw the delivery truck. Or rather, what was left of it. The massive vehicle had plowed through 2 parking spaces and slammed into a van, its front end crushed inward. Debris scattered across the concrete. Smoke curled from the hood. Alarms wailed in panic chorus. And just beyond the support column, half hidden in shadow, the man who had taken her daughter crouched low, his body curved protectively around Matilda, shielding her completely. The truth hit Vivian all at once, brutal and undeniable. He hadn't taken her. He had saved her. Vivian Constance had built her life on control. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in her company's history, the platinum blonde architect of Constance Biotech's meteoric rise. She moved through boardrooms with precise confidence, her tailored suits immaculate, her expression unreadable. Investors trusted her. Competitors feared her. Employees respected her with a mix of awe and distance. They called her the Ice Queen, not because she was cruel, but because nothing seemed to touch her. Vivian had learned early that emotions were liabilities. Raised in a household where affection was conditional and praise was transactional, she understood that love came with expectations and consequences. Distance, she decided, was safer. Distance was power. Her divorce 3 years earlier had cemented that belief. Her ex-husband's betrayal hadn't been emotional. It had been strategic, calculated, surgical. He had used her trust like a weapon and walked away without regret. After that, Vivian closed herself off completely, except for one person. Matilda, her daughter, was the only crack in Vivian's armor, the only place warmth still lived. But even that bond bore scars. Late nights, missed recitals, nannies instead of pickups. Vivian told herself she was providing, protecting, building a future, but guilt followed her like a shadow. At night, lying awake, she wondered what Matilda would remember one day. A mother who was present, or a mother who was always almost there. Matilda Constance was everything Vivian was not: open, gentle, trusting. At 6 years old, Matilda navigated the world clutching a small, well-worn stuffed bunny named Clover. She had wide blue eyes full of wonder, and a shy smile she offered only when she felt safe. She was afraid of the dark, afraid of echoes, terrified of underground parking garages where shadows swallowed the light. But more than anything, Matilda was afraid of losing her mother. Archibald Leyen knew what loss truly meant. At 36, he carried himself with a quiet strength forged by years of disaster zones and impossible choices. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that never stopped scanning his surroundings, Archibald had once been one of the best technical rescue specialists in the field. He had led teams into collapsed buildings, floodwaters, infernos. He had crawled through twisted steel and unstable concrete, while others froze. He had a gift, an almost supernatural instinct for danger. They used to call him human radar. But even radar failed sometimes. 3 years ago, during a large-scale rescue operation, his wife Louisa Lane had been critically injured. The emergency medical response, outsourced through a biotech subsidiary, had suffered a dispatch delay caused by a system malfunction. Help arrived too late. Archibald had held Louisa's hand as her pulse faded beneath his fingers. He had begged. He had screamed. He had promised everything. None of it mattered. He left the rescue corps the day after her funeral. Now, Archibald cleaned offices and repaired machinery. He took odd jobs wherever he could find them. The pay barely covered rent and groceries, but it kept food on the table and allowed him to be present for the one person who still needed him, his son. Flynn Lane was 8 years old and far too perceptive for his age. He carried grief quietly, helping with chores, excelling in school, never complaining. At night, he whispered promises to his mother's photograph, vowing to take care of his father. Flynn was the reason Archibald kept going. The night everything changed began like any other. Vivian had finished an emergency board meeting 3 hours late. Exhausted, sharp-tempered. She picked up Matilda from daycare and stopped at the shopping center for groceries. Matilda, overtired and fussy, begged to bring Clover. Vivian agreed. Archibald was finishing his shift in the same building, deep cleaning the underground garage. One more level, then home. Neither of them noticed Matilda drop Clover near the rear of Vivian's car. The little girl slipped away to retrieve her bunny. Vivian, distracted by her phone, didn't see her go. 3 levels above, a delivery truck sat parked at an incline. Its handbrake had been loosened deliberately. The truck began to roll. The sound was almost imperceptible. But to Archibald, it was a scream. He looked up and saw her. A tiny girl in pink, crouched behind a car, directly in the truck's path. Archibald ran. He reached Matilda just as she stood up, Clover clutched in her hands. He scooped her into his arms and dove behind a support column as the truck thundered past, crashing seconds later in a violent explosion of steel and glass. Vivian saw only a man running away with her child. Security swarmed. Accusations flew. Archibald was restrained. Until the footage played. Until the truth shattered the room. Matilda broke free and wrapped her arms around Archibald's leg. "He saved me," she said clearly. Vivian felt something crack inside her chest. She apologized, hoarse, broken, sincere. Archibald accepted nothing. He simply asked to go home and walked away. But the danger wasn't over. The truck hadn't been an accident. Someone had loosened the bolts on purpose. Someone had wanted chaos. Someone had wanted her child. That night, Vivian memorized Archibald Lane's name. She didn't yet know why. She just knew their lives weren't finished colliding. That night, Vivian Constance did not sleep. She sat on the edge of Matilda's bed long after the little girl had drifted off. Clover tucked beneath her chin, small fingers curled tightly even in dreams. Vivian watched her daughter's chest rise and fall. Each breath a fragile miracle she could not stop replaying in her mind. The crash, the scream, the look in that man's eyes when she'd shoved him. Not anger, not resentment, just exhaustion, and something heartbreakingly familiar, grief. Vivian rarely searched people online. It felt invasive, unnecessary. But near midnight, her restraint cracked. She typed his name into her phone, Archibald Lane. The results were sparse, but what she found made her sit straighter. Former technical rescue specialist, decorated service record, left the field 3 years ago under personal circumstances. There was a photo attached to an old article. Archibald in uniform, standing beside a rescue team after pulling survivors from a collapsed building. He looked younger, lighter, almost happy. Vivian stared at the image for a long time. Then she made a decision. She would find him. She would apologize properly. And she would make sure he knew that saving her daughter mattered. Archibald, meanwhile, lay awake in his small apartment across the city, staring at the ceiling. Flynn slept in the next room, his soft breathing grounding Archibald in the present. He replayed the night again and again. He had done the right thing. He knew that, but the fear in Vivian's eyes, the accusation, had cut deeper than he wanted to admit. It dragged up every moment he hadn't been fast enough. Every rescue that ended too late. Every memory of Louisa. She would kiss his forehead and told him he was a hero, even if no one else did. But Louisa was gone, and heroes didn't get paid in rent money. The next evening, the parking garage lost power. Vivian had returned to retrieve documents she'd forgotten in her car. Against her better judgment, Matilda came with her. The little girl had refused to be separated all day, clinging tightly, her fear still fresh. The lights flickered once, twice, then darkness swallowed the garage. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting long, warped shadows. Matilda whimpered. Vivian switched on her phone flashlight, her pulse hammering. They were almost at the car when Matilda gasped. Clover, the bunny had slipped from her arms, rolling toward a dark corner near the stairwell. Matilda, wait. Too late. The child broke free and ran. Vivian chased her, heart pounding, the beam of her phone cutting through the darkness. She heard a sound ahead, movement, a low voice. Her blood turned to ice. She rounded the corner and saw a man in a dark hoodie gripping Matilda's wrist, dragging her toward the stairwell. Matilda screamed, kicking, fighting with every ounce of her small body. Vivian lunged forward, and another figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. Before she could scream again, a familiar voice rang out behind her. Get down. Vivian dropped instinctively. Archibald Lane sprinted past her, moving with terrifying precision. He reached the attacker in seconds, wrenched Matilda free with one arm, and struck the man hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. The attackers fled. Archibald knelt, checking Matilda gently. Are you hurt? She shook her head and threw her arms around his neck. Vivian ran to them and pulled them both into an embrace before she even realized what she was doing. She was shaking too badly to speak. Archibald pulled back first. We need to leave, he said firmly. He escorted them to the car, checked the trunk, the back seat, every blind spot. Only when they were safely inside did he step away. How did you know? Vivian asked, her voice breaking. I had a bad feeling, he admitted. The truck was an accident. She asked him to meet her the next day. He hesitated, then looked at Matilda. Yes, he said quietly. At the coffee shop the next day, Matilda handed Archibald a drawing, 3 stick figures. You're the hero, she told him. Something in his expression softened. Vivian told him everything, threats, rivals, the attempted takeover. Archibald listened, then asked a single question. Is there anyone who hates you personally? She shook her head. That's the problem, he said. This is personal. He didn't sugarcoat it. Whoever it was wasn't done. Vivian asked him to help protect Matilda. He said yes, not for the money, for the child. Days later, the truth surfaced. A file, a subsidiary, a delayed dispatch. Louisa Lane. Archibald went still. Vivian understood in a single, devastating moment. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, he said, but it still hurts. He stayed. He kept his promise. The morning Matilda disappeared, Vivian screamed until her throat burned. A cut screen, an empty bed, a note, come alone. Archibald refused to let her. They went together. The warehouse smelled of rust and rot. Matilda was tied to a chair. Corbin Elam waited. The rival, the architect of everything. He confessed to it all. The sabotage, the bribe, Louisa's death. Archibald attacked. Steel flashed. Blood spilled. Vivian stepped between them. Sirens shattered the moment. Corbin fell. Matilda was freed. Archibald collapsed. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Vivian prayed for the first time in years. Archibald lived. In recovery, Vivian took his hand and told him everything she hadn't known how to say. He told her he'd do it all again. Weeks passed. Healing, therapy, laughter. Flynn and Matilda became inseparable. One evening, in the park, Matilda took both their hands. Can we be a family? Vivian and Archibald didn't answer. They didn't need to. As they walked beneath the golden light, fear loosened its grip for the first time in years. This wasn't coincidence. This was coming home. And neither of them was afraid anymore.